Hey guys, in this video I'm going to draw and shade this lower leg. In the premium anatomy course at proko.com/anatomy, you'll find 3 more examples of the calf assignments. I'll walk you guys through all the anatomy in each pose. We'll analyze all the forms and shade them so that you understand what you're seeing 3-dimensionally. You can find those in the premium anatomy course over at proko.com/anatomy. Alright guys, we're going to move on to calf assignments. Got a really nice dynamic leg here of Chris. So the assignment was to start with the gesture, get all the landmarks in, get the structure in there correctly, make sure everything's tracking right, and then to actually do some shading. I haven't done too much of that in this course because I feel like it distracts a lot of the students from what's important in these studies, and that is to make sure your anatomy and your structure is correct. And when people start shading, they just kind of forget about that and they start just looking at the shapes in the reference and just copying that, and I can't tell if they know what they're doing, but it's just hidden by their bad shading, or if they don't know where everything goes and the shading is wrong. Or if they do not know what they're doing, but they are good at shading and so it looks cool, but it's wrong. But we're getting towards the end of the course. I wanted to have a little bit of fun, so we'll see how this goes. Just a little reminder for you guys, the shading goes on top of good construction, on top of good gesture. So don't jump right in with the shading. As I've said, I'm going to start with the gesture, and there's a nice rhythm, nice little S curve, starting from the quads, going through the inside of the knee. Medial side of the tibia has this really nice curve, and that drops down to the foot. Something like that. I don't know if that's exactly accurate, but we'll know once I put a little bit more in, and that's going to be easy to fix if I realize that that's wrong. Because it's a simple line. Very easy to move a simple line. There's no detail in it yet. This is definitely too thick in the ankle. Yeah, there you go. Quick adjustment. I really like the tension on the foot and in the ankle in this. That's why I'm kind of spending a little bit of time on this, because if I get this wrong, I think the gesture, the power of this pose won't be right. It's all rooted in that foot. So I want to make sure that's correct before I start figuring out all the calf stuff up here. Okay, so we know that the top of the heel bone is like right here, and that's where the Achilles tendon attaches, and then the thinnest part of the Achilles is a little bit above that, like right there. So I know that this gesture line in here is going to kind of get a little bit thicker again as it goes towards the heel. Okay, I'm just going to get a few of these creases in here, show the tension, and that's probably good enough for this foot. Okay, let's work our way back up. So down here, there is the malleolus. The medial malleolus is right about here. It's lower than the Achilles in this angle. We don't see the lateral malleolus, but it is a little bit lower even than this one. It goes in the opposite angle of the angle between the two heads of the gastrocnemius. But that doesn't matter in this case. But notice how this initial rhythm that I brought through here, I kind of ignored all these surface details, like the malleolus is a little bump here, and then there's more bumps going down the foot in here, and then even the gastrocnemius and the soleus down here. These are all little bumps on the surface, but I just went right through everything and went from the inside of the knee, from that tendinous bundle, C-curve all the way down to the ground. And that gets me my gesture. And now I go through and I add all the subtle bumps within, still making sure I'm going to keep the general sweep through here. And before I start putting these bumps, I'm just going to take a quick measurement just to make sure my vertical alignments are correct for now. So I'm going to take a measurement of the foot from the corner of the heel, the bottom of the foot, up. And that pretty much takes me to like kind of the bottom of the soleus, the visible part of the soleus. right as it meets the Achilles. And then from there, another one up, almost reaches the peak over here. So right here-ish, halfway. I might have made the foot too large. Because if I do this up, that would take me to the soleus. Oh, actually not. And then, okay, so I just need to raise this peak a little bit up. Just a little bit higher, and then I'm fine. So right about here is where the soleus would attach to the Achilles. And that looks right about where I'd put it visually, looking at my reference. So 1, 2, 3, and that works out. Plumb line that I'm checking right now is from the the big toe going straight up, and that takes me to the side of the gastrocnemius here. Now, I exaggerated the size of this big toe. I think it makes it look more grounded. So I'm going to go in a little bit, and then from there up, right about there is the size of the gastrocnemius, and that's correct. Okay, now I'm going to start putting in the calves, the gastrocnemius and the soleus. So from here, from this point, angled quite a bit down, is the bottom of the medial head, right about there. And remember how this one is more of a comma shape, whereas this one, the lateral one, is a lot more of a, just kind of a thinner, straight line down. So you're seeing a few things here. One is the gastrocnemius has a little bump on the top here where the two tails kind of split off, and they also create a little, like a stair step form right in here. Eggy is what we call it in the lesson. Also, the top of that form is softened into the hamstrings right in here by the popliteal fat. And so that's kind of what you're seeing right in here. There's a little halftone right there. That's the fat pad. And then right here, you're seeing an edge for the gastrocnemius coming up. And then in between, it's really soft. Okay, and then through here, you got a bunch of hamstring stuff. Right in here, you're seeing a little bit of the side of the tibia, and then a very subtle transition to the tendinous bundle right there. And then that goes up, and you're pretty much, from there, you're seeing a rhythm up the sartorius muscle. And that goes around to the front, around the adductors. And then right here is the adductor group. And then right in front of that, right there, is the quad group. Okay, back down here in the calves. So the soleus, remember it's high on the lateral side, low on the medial side, just like the gastrocnemius. So right here, you see a second bump coming in pretty strong, and then into the to the Achilles tendon. And I'm not seeing any kind of pinching of the Achilles tendon onto the soleus right through here. Sometimes what you'll see is a bump of the soleus, and then a curvature of the Achilles, and then another bump for the soleus. So you'll see like 3 pipes running down. But I'm not seeing any of that. Maybe right in here, on this side, I'm seeing a little halftone, but it's hard to tell. Okay, we got all the muscles mapped out in here. When I start shading, I like to map out the core shadows and the cast shadows. For core shadows, I'm going to use the side of the pencil. That's why I have it sharpened this way, because it's easy to get different edge qualities. So the side of the pencil will give me a soft edge or a firm edge, which is usually what a core shadow will be. If you just go to Proko.com and search through all the lessons, you'll find several shading lessons on there. And not all core shadows are going to be the same type of edge. For example, up here, this form is smaller and there's a tighter corner in here. So this core shadow is going to be a little bit thinner, more of a firm edge. And then as I make my way down to this very rounded medial gastrocnemius head, I'm going to soften out that edge. See how much wider that is? It's a softer transition. And then as it comes up, I slowly transition it to this sharper, firmer edge. And also the value, I like to change up how light or dark it is. For example, as this comes out and starts to roll into this bottom plane, it kind of fades out and becomes a halftone. And so sometimes I'll just slowly let it disappear and maybe indicate a little bit of a halftone, but then you have to start thinking about halftones and shadows at the same time. You're starting to get a little bit more advanced there. If you're new to shading, try to map out just the shadows at first. Separate light and shadow. And don't worry about halftones yet. Then once you're done mapping that out, shading that in, then go back in with the halftones. See how I made that edge down here really sharp? That's because there's a little cast shadow from the gastrocnemius down onto the soleus, and then from there it picks back up again, and it is a core shadow, and it's a little bit firmer than this one because it's not as round of a belly. It's more of the soleus is a flatter muscle. It's like a little pancake. And then it takes a sharp turn into the Achilles. And then down here, there's another cast shadow from the soleus this time, onto the flexor digitorum longus, right there. And then a much thinner core shadow into the tendon. And then into the malleolus. Right here, I like this, the shadow on the heel. It shows a really nice back plane and side plane of the foot. Yeah, right. And that exaggerated big toe is going to have to be tamed a little bit. Okay, so this is shadow mapping. I've mapped out all the shadows. So now the next step is pretty easy. I just fill in all the shadows with a shadow value, kind of a medium shadow value. It's like a mid-tone. I've already defined the edge quality, so it should feel three-dimensional as soon as I fill it in. All right, and sometimes for a little sketch, I'll stop here, but because we're trying to study the form of the calf, I don't want to just go graphic and just kind of copy edges. I want to really figure out what are the planes that we're looking at here. So I'd said there's like a little egg up here, so I'm going to add a little halftone on the side, and I might need to darken my shadow a bit actually. Sometimes if the shadow is not dark enough, the halftones begin competing with it. And the halftones should not get any darker than the shadow, unless you have a secondary light source coming in from the other side, then that's a different story. Just going through and designing my lines a little bit better with my contours, adding a little more variety there. Going a little bit darker and thicker in the shadow side is usually pretty safe. It's probably going to look better. If you go really heavy on this side, it might stand out a little bit too much. So you have to be a little more picky with which lines on the light side you boost and darken and make thicker. Okay, and then I'm going to have to go back in and darken this core shadow just a little bit again. Okay, so now I think it's safe to go in and bring out some halftones. I think my shadows are finally dark enough that I can start playing around with halftone value. So some important halftones, plane right in here, kind of like a middle separator between the two sides. There's a bottom plane right in here that's mostly halftone, but I'm blending it in. There's a very good transition between these two, or a very subtle transition between them. Halftone on this side. The entire lateral gastrocnemius is kind of wrapping around to the other side, facing that way, and so it's not going to get any highlights. Notice that the only highlight on the calf is right in there, on the medial side. So this entire side is in shadow, and then as it goes up and kind of wraps even more around behind this secondary bump, this plane gets even darker. And I just want to be careful that I don't make it darker than the shadow. The soleus is also pretty much in halftone, except in the middle, where the Achilles tendon is running through. So I'm going to transition this way, a little bit darker on the sides, and then I see a really nice highlight on the Achilles tendon. And then this side, almost actually a shadow right there, and then very dark halftone in here, all the way through. I know a tendency that I used to have when I was first learning to shade is to make every patch of light just almost light, like white. But then when you really compare this patch of light to, say, this right here in the gastrocnemius, this is much darker. There's nothing in here that's a highlight, not even close. So you have to drop that value because this part of it is starting to roll towards the side quite a bit. Nothing is really facing backward towards the light. Same thing in here on the heel. Notice how dark that is? It's not a shadow yet, but it's almost a bottom plane, just barely not a bottom plane. And so it's going to be a very dark halftone value, but still lighter than this. Okay, good enough indication here. Not going to get too crazy. And then in here, as you can tell, also this patch of light is darker than this whole patch because it's not really a back plane, it's more of a diagonal plane before it becomes side plane. So this is diagonal plane, more of a halftone plane, all the way through. So you kind of have to start thinking like which direction is this plane going? You got a side plane, you got a back plane, and then in between you have another kind of segment which will be in between. It's a halftone. It's halfway. Although not all halftones are halfway, right? They're kind of, there's like an infinite amount of planes in between, but in your mind you want to simplify them. I usually like to think of shadow as one family, light as another family. Then within that, within my lights, I have my lightest light plane, which is like a highlight, and then a light halftone and a dark halftone. And that's as complicated as I want to think about until I really start, like if I'm doing a graphite drawing where I'm going to spend like 8 hours on it, towards the end I start really thinking about, 10, 12, 15 values, but that's really far into the process. At early stages, and pretty much at all stages of a drawing that's this short, just like half an hour I think I'm spending on this, maybe 40 minutes, I'm never really getting into that many values. At least not intentionally. Some of the values I put down might be subtly different, but that's not because I'm trying to. I'm just, in my mind, I'm only thinking about a few, like 5 values. Is it a highlight? Is it a light halftone, a dark halftone, a reflected light in my shadow, or a core shadow? That's pretty much 5 values. Okay, I think this is pretty much enough. If I want to make this stand out more, I could kind of just take my pencil and darken this entire hamstring area. And that'll just bring the attention to that light spot. All right, I'm happy with it.
All right, guys, if you enjoyed that, head on over to proko.com/anatomy for 3 more examples that are included in the premium anatomy course. All right, thanks for watching, and thank you very much for the support.